In psychoanalysis, a Freudian slip, also called parapraxis, is an error in speech, memory, or physical action that occurs due to the interference of an unconscious subdued wish or internal train of thought. Classical examples involve slips of the tongue, but psychoanalytic theory also embraces misreadings, mishearings, mistypings, temporary forgettings, and the mislaying and losing of objects. The Freudian slip is named after Sigmund Freud, who, in his 1901 book The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, described and analyzed a large number of seemingly trivial, even bizarre or nonsensical errors and slips, most notably the signorally parapraxis. Freud referred to these slips as Fehlstungen, meaning faulty functions or misperformances or faulty actions in German. Freud's process of psychoanalysis is often quite lengthy and complex, as was the case with many of the dreams in his 1899 book, The Interpretation of Dreams. An obstacle that faces the non-German speaking reader is such that in original German, The Interpretation of Dreams, Freud's emphasis on slips of the tongue leads to the inclusion of a great deal of colloquial and informal material that are extremely resistant to translations. As in the study of dreams, Freud submits his discussion with the intention of demonstrating the existence of unconscious mental processes in the healthy. He says, in the same way that psychoanalysis makes use of dream interpretation, it also profits by the study of the numerous little slips and mistakes which people make. Symptomatic actions, as they are called. I have pointed out that these phenomena are not accidental, that they require more than physiological explanations, that they have a meaning and can be interpreted, and that one is justified in inferring from them the presence of restrained or repressed impulses and intentions. According to Freud, bits of the unconscious mind leak out into conscious behaviors, and this prompts you to say something other than what you had intended. These memory lapses and errors happen when thoughts or desires you've either suppressed or repressed resurface. Today, a so-called Freudian slip might describe any kind of misspeak. These errors don't always have a psychoanalytic interpretation. For example, a child who accidentally calls their teacher mom is simply transitioning from spending most of the day with their mother to spending most of the day with their teacher. A stressed parent who calls one child by the name of another child is often simply busy and tired. There is a book called Freud's Theory and Its Use in Literary and Cultural Studies by Professor Henk de Burg, who separates Freudian slips into the following categories. The first category is forgetfulness linked to repression. Certain Freudian slips involve a slip of memory rather than the tongue. According to psychoanalytic theory, when you experience something that causes shame, fear, or pain, your mind may respond by pushing away memories of that event. If you happen to encounter something later in life that's similar to that event, you might find yourself forgetting that too. Say, as a child you were bitten by a dog. This dog had a fairly gentle nature, but one day you poked him, ignoring warning growls, until he bit your arm. You needed several stitches, but other than a slight mistrust of large dogs, you have no memory of the incident or the dog's name, which was Nottingham. Yet when a new co-worker, Carl Nottingham, joins your team, you find it embarrassingly difficult to remember his last name. You remember Carl just fine, but consistently draw a blank on what comes next. A psychoanalytic interpretation might suggest your mind avoids the memory of his name, since it could trigger buried memories of the dog Nottingham and the traumatic experience of being bitten. Moving on, the second type is forgetfulness linked to desire. Another kind of memory slip can happen when you do or do not want to do something. Regarding that lengthy to-do list of important errands and chores you keep misplacing, Psychoanalysis would likely offer the explanation that you continue to lose the list in order to delay those less than pleasant tasks. Here's another example. One day after a lecture, you get to chatting with an extremely attractive classmate who then offers you a ride home. As your conversation continues, a crush blossoms. All you can think about is how to see them again. When you get out of the car outside your house, you unwillingly leave your wallet and phone under the passenger seat. Once you realize, you look up your classmate in the class directory so you can get in touch to reclaim your possessions. Maybe you didn't actually think, I'll leave my stuff in the car so we can meet up later. Still, psychoanalytic reasoning might suggest this desire drove you to forget these things so you could have a reason to contact your classmate. The third type is spoken distortions. This is what most people think of when they hear about Freudian slips, slip-ups in your speaking that do not make much sense. Continuing our previous example of your co-worker Carl Nottingham, perhaps instead of simply forgetting his name, you consistently use the wrong name. You substitute other names such as Twickenham, Birmingham, or Nortonson, to the point where your inability to remember becomes a running joke in the office. This doesn't happen intentionally. Your brain is simply attempting to find a compromise between your conscious and unconscious thoughts. In modern culture, Freudian slips, mainly spoken distortions, are often assumed to have sexual undertones. This is probably at least partially due to people associating Freud with his work on psychosexual development. You might say, I'll lick you up after work, to your partner rather than I'll pick you up after work, or bed and butter instead of bread and butter. Slip-ups of a sexual nature are pretty common. Psychoanalysis would most likely trace these back to thoughts of sex lurking just below your conscious mind. Now, do Freudian slips actually reveal anything? The very nature of Freudian slips makes them difficult to study in a research setting, primarily because they happen so randomly. If they do relate to unconscious desires, as Freud suggested, researchers would need to explore your unconscious mind in order to find support for the existence of these desires. Because psychoanalysis holds that slips happen as a momentary lapse in your ability to keep those thoughts repressed, research would also require a closer look at this internal conflict. Since experts have limited means of measuring unconscious thoughts and internal conflict, they have yet to find conclusive evidence that Freudian slips are a direct result of any unconscious urges or impulses you may have.